The cultural reworking and reclamation started just over a decade ago, deep in the mires of the weird internet.
In 2010, a shitposting Twitter user named Dilbert, using the handle @ILikeStapler, posted the inscrutable text, "Why Shrek is pitch? Why Shrek is pitch? Why Shrek is pitch? Why Shrek is pitch?"
If you watch this show with any degree of regularity, you're already familiar with the idea of video remix culture. You know, taking a beloved film or TV episode or Simpsons joke about hamburgers being called regionally steamed hams.
These are steamed hams. That's what I call hamburgers. You call hamburgers steamed hams.
Loading it into Premiere Pro and just fucking around with it endlessly. Hell, we started this relaunch with an episode about Shrek that dealt in large part with fan-made reanimates, which are themselves a form of remix culture. Well, this time around, we're tackling an online microculture that throbs at the intersection of several other online microcultures that we've already looked at, like video remixing and vaporwave, a musical and video subgenre that evokes a sense of buzzing, neon, dreamy nostalgia. Today, it is all about racer trash.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Pass me some soup. Put me in the car.
Racer Trash was an online video collective that remixed beloved movies like Heat and Alien and Baz Luhrmann's William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the one with John Leguizamo, and they also remixed not-so-beloved movies. The group's first major project was Speed Vapor. Streamed online in May 2020, a riff on the Wachowskis' critically maligned, although many would argue simply misunderstood, blockbuster adaptation of the 60s anime Speed Racer. And like a lot of recent online subcultures, Racer Trash was born of necessity, specifically the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting government lockdowns and social distancing measures.
I'm Alex Jacobs. I'm the guy who said we should do a vaporwave edit of Speed Racer. We did the screening on my birthday. That was the birth of Racer Trash, really. We were in a group chat with a bunch of other editors, mostly editors, not entirely, but like, you know, people who work on movies, storytellers. So we were already watching movies together on Twitch, just to like be in the chat and have it be more of a communal experience for us. Those of us who are like I was living alone, I'll speak for myself. And at a certain point, it just became like the logical next step to begin editing the movies as well. I made a very hasty spreadsheet where we assigned 10-minute chunks of the movie Speed Racer to people and told them to do it as vaporwave. And we started seeing each other's segments and getting really excited. It all kind of iron sharpened iron. The excitement fed into more of that. It was just something we were all very excited to do online when that was the only place we could hang out.
How important was the sort of social aspect of just working alongside other people whose work you admired and you respected?
For me, that was the whole point of it, really, is that it started to feel like a creative potluck. Sort of, everybody would bring their dish and we'd all enjoy them together. And it started to feel like we were going to a party tonight or something, even though you're obviously just going online. As pathetic as that sounds, we needed it.
Racer Trash had precedence, of course. First, there was the literal films themselves, but there were also other online video collectives like Everything is Terrible, which began uploading scavenged VHS tapes to YouTube around 2007, re-editing and condensing them to make them seem even weirder. They'd also just like re-edit interviews with Tim Allen to make them seem even more sinister.
I don't really like children, and even my own. I'm bigger than them, and I know a lot more than them. I love to scream at children.
Racer Trash felt like a next step. Their edits were longer, more involved, more ambient. They were made not to be programmed into playlists or supercuts, but to sink into. It's easy and extremely fun to get moon face emoji high and watch these spacey spectacles. It's just as easy to miss how massive an artistic accomplishment they are. No one could blame you for thinking that the team just ran clueless through the weed filter in After Effects. But these were highly considered and detailed feature-length works that required huge amounts of labor and computing power, made at scale in relatively short periods of time.
Your dirty moment
这
count.
大名怎么称呼啊？
Oh, ninjas go rapper, rapper, rapper.
You edit it, and then it's like a 10-step process for me now, where it's you edit it, and then you color it, and then you run it through whatever After Effects you're going to do, and you take that, and you put that through one of these TVs in the back with the CRT filter, and then you use circuit bending to make that look weird, bring that back in, put all the plates on top of each other. I mean, part of the community aspect of it was we would all recommend these like techniques to each other, and someone showed me the Etsy seller where they bought their analog glitching gear, their first stuff, and that's where I started buying my stuff. And it was like one guy on the East Coast, like slowly feeding Racer Trash more and more circuit bending gear. Yeah.
It may seem like a billion years ago now, but when Racer Trash first premiered during the peak of the pandemic lockdowns, there wasn't a lot going on entertainment-wise. is. Sure, some studios and filmmakers desperately drop stuff on streaming platforms. Who amongst us didn't make an evening of spending $25 to rent the 20,000 hour-long Judd Apatow comedy about Pete Davidson putting down the bong and becoming a fireman? And even more desperately, some people attempted to make movies that foregrounded the pandemic. Stone cold, enduring classics like Coastal Elites and Malcolm and Marie. I personally rented Godzilla vs. Kong at full price 2 times because I was so desperate to escape my depression hole and move to Hollow Earth. At the same time, tech companies and developers scrambled to seize the opportunity provided by the so-called digital surge. Like take Zoom, for example. You all know Zoom, you probably still use it, but did any of you really use it pre-COVID? No, you probably used Skype or the telephone. Or House Party. Remember House Party? The video chat / streaming / party app that pretty much came and went.
House Party app. You need to delete it because they're hacking your bank accounts.
Early Racer Trash Productions seized on that by streaming live on Twitch. At the time, Twitch was more or less exclusively used for streaming live video game content and making millionaires of Fortnite players. But there was nothing explicitly stating the platform had to be used that way.
We were watching stuff on Twitch like before that just because it was the easiest way to kind of get people in a chat together watching the same thing. But I personally have always been kind of obsessed with the idea of having a pirate TV channel or like something where you can do like hackers, like, you know, Hack the Planet show that comes in at a certain time and people know where to look at. Like I've always been obsessed with that idea. So that was definitely my motivation behind like all of the early, when I was running the Racer Trash streams, it was always a weird broadcast. It always kind of started with static and then it was like weird cat videos and then the main thing, like it was the structure of it was very important to me.
Racer Trash for me, I'm not like a big Twitch user, but that was the first thing that I had seen on Twitch that wasn't like video. Like I just thought of it as a video gaming platform. And then during the pandemic, it was like you guys, and then I got into like musicians, and there was all of a sudden like now Twitch has all of this stuff. But like Racer Trash to me was like I downloaded Twitch like on, you know, I got the app on my fucking TV to be able to watch Racer Trash.
I mean, that was how it was for me. Like I wasn't using Twitch. I play video games. I don't really watch a lot of video games. I wasn't spending a lot of time on Twitch, but just looking at the options, that seemed like that was the easiest path towards having a weird pirate TV channel. So that's what we did.
Especially during the lockdowns, Racer Trash Twitch streams became an event. During the height of the lockdown, my friends and I would watch movies together by all hitting play on Ma at the same time.
You guys want to party like rock stars?
But eventually they would fall asleep and I would be wired and alone at 3 a.m. I saw some tweets about these wavy ass streams and suddenly found myself immersed in this blissed out all night session that made lockdown feel a little less lonely. I couldn't wait to tell my friends about this dumb, incredible shit, which is clearly how a lot of lonely stoners felt. Racer Trash streams became so popular they even garnered the attention of people within major film institutions. In 2021, the group was invited to the headquarters of the Toronto International Film Festival, easily one of the world's most reputable annual film festivals and definitely the most reputable annual film festival held in Ontario, to premiere some new remixes, including a riff on the cult classic comedy Brain Candy by the local heroes Kids in the Hall.
My name's Peter Kaplowski. I'm an independent film producer and curator with the Toronto International Film Festival. During the pandemic, I became a fan of this video art collective, Racer Trash. I was actually a witness to the first edition of the collective, and it really was like a lifeboat during the pandemic of being able to interact with a film community that in many ways was capturing the spirit of going to go see movies with a live crowd. It was interactive, it was cult ritualistic behavior that was occurring, and to me, I mean, it really did feel like this is the future of movies, and it felt like a really interesting way to engage with films virtually in a virtual environment, but not have it feel like we were all alone. It really felt community oriented. It felt like you were watching, you know, with every broadcast, it felt like a diary of what we were all experiencing. It just, to me, felt like a really interesting way to exhibit and present cinema through the medium of waving or remixing the various terms that the community had given it. And then so to me, it just seemed like a logical idea that, you know, as the festivals all around the world were doing virtual screenings, I was really interested in including Racer trash or remix culture in general into these virtual screenings. But then as it happened, TIFF was one of the few festivals that was able to do in-person screenings throughout COVID, both in 2020 and 2021. TIFF has a section called Midnight Madness that for the past 30 years really to me has always symbolized, even before I was involved, like the state of the union of not necessarily just genre movies, but like the concept of midnight cinema and midnight film, whatever that means. And I think that's a subjective term, but to me, it always feels like midnight movies are these movies that are less a genre, but more of an attitude. And it's an expression of cinema that is transgressive and subversive. There's a punk aspect to it. It's more of an alt culture aspect to it. All these things, or, you know, these definitions of midnight movie, I found in and identified in the racer trash culture and these racer trash remixes. You know, if I, as a curator, felt that the Midnight Madness section should reflect what are the films that I think are moving the needle in terms of how audiences, especially interactive and cult audiences, are interacting with transgressive genre cinema or simply just experimental but entertaining and raucous movies, then, you know, racer trash is absolutely something that needed to be a part of that. And so I pitched it, and TIFF initially was interested and intrigued by the idea. I don't think their lawyers could get a handle on what the repercussions would be if a stakeholder, you know, say a film studio was like, hey, what are they doing to our movies? So that became complicated, but I was undeterred. I really felt like this needed to be, you know, what Racer Trash was doing needed to be kind of recognized by an institution. And so what I realized is, well, you know, typically TIFF Midnight Madness is 10 films, and I've always looked at it as like a top 10 of these are the 10 films that are moving the needle in terms of genre, in terms of midnight cinema, in terms of just sort of late night weird curios. But because of the pandemic, TIFF was operating on a smaller scale. We were presenting less movies, which meant that year I was going to only present 6 films, not 10 films, which that meant several nights of the duration of the festival, I would be dark. I would not have a midnight premiere. So I went, this is perfect. That means on the nights that I can go dark, that I'm going dark and there's not a midnight premiere at the festival, I'll just rent a cinema myself, completely absolving TIFF of any legal responsibility, and then present Racer Trash broadcasts. And TIFF, bless them, was okay with it.
Initially, when it emerged during those long lockdowns, Racer Trash's vaporwave / retro baiting aesthetic just clicked. Given the time, the place, and the generally miserable mood enjoyed by basically every living person on the planet, sitting around watching warm, fuzzy, like literally warm and fuzzy looking takes on movies we all loved, well, it just, as they say, hit different. But in time, as Racer Trash became more popular and gained attention thanks to the institutional support of organizations like TIFF, it started growing, and that aesthetic started changing.
My name's Adam Wingard, and I was one of the many editing participants in Racer Trash. I kind of worked in Racer Trash for about a good year and a half, I believe.
People are going to be seeing a lot of Racer Trash visuals and hearing me talk very excitedly about what it meant to be in these Twitch streams, you know, in the middle of the pandemic. But for you, I mean, if you had to boil it down, what was the attraction of Racer Trash in that kind of weird historical moment we were all living through?
Well, Racer Trash for me was like a kind of a revolutionary sort of moment. I mean, I'd been in the mainstream studio film world for the better part of a decade at that point. And I was just coming off of Godzilla vs. Kong, which at the time was my biggest, you know, movie and probably the most challenging I had. And, you know, anytime you're doing a studio film at any level, you're going to just have to deal with the overseers that come along with that. And, you know, half your job is like kind of saving the studio from their worst instincts. And, you know, half the job is trying to bring your own creativity to it. So while you can make great stuff in the studio world, it's not very fun most of the time. You know, it's a lot of work just to hold on to this thing. It is very gratifying. And, you know, you obviously have access to things like money and crew and equipment and all these things that allow you to do great things. things, but at the end of the day, it comes with a toll, basically. So whenever I discovered Racer Trash, I was immediately enamored with it. The first one I believe I saw was Alien and the Dracula double feature. I can't remember the exact names of them. They always have good names. And I was just blown away. But the appeal to me of Racer Trash in general was just that thing of, I'm just going to do this for myself. And I just loved how some of the segments were, yeah, this is about Alien, but it might go off on like a completely different movie for some reason, you know, and then come back to Alien. I just like that there was 1000% freedom to it. And that to me as a filmmaker was something that I needed to do and I got obsessed with. And ultimately I kind of ended up getting drug into it in a weird way as well. Right after I saw that first one, I put the bat signal out on Instagram, and you know, and I was contacted by a couple of the people at Racer Trash. You know, like they'd heard of my movies, and I mean, Alex Jacobs had somehow actually seen my earliest film, Pop Skull, which in a lot of ways has a lot of Racer Trashy kind of vibes. You know, very psychedelic movie with a lot of crazy editing. So we kind of hit it off right away, and we jumped right in. And the first one I did was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was a movie I really enjoyed when it came out, but it's not a movie that I revisit necessarily, and it definitely wouldn't have been my first choice as Racer Trash. But I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do whatever they give me. And of course, I got a segment of the film which was just two people sitting at a table talking, so I ended up just splicing together a whole bunch of crazy Hong Kong movie footage together. And I ended up going in kind of a different direction than a lot of people, because I kind of took a lot of my horror roots, you know, my influences, and brought it to Racer Trash. And so a lot of times my segments tended to be a little darker than everybody else.
It wasn't long before Racer Trash wasn't just appropriating or remixing old retro vaporwave aesthetics. They were creating something new, or new-ish, maybe novel is the right word. There were projects like The Abadook, which remixed the Australian maternal horror movie The Babadook with the music of Swedish pop sensations ABBA. Or even more niche-ly, Board of Canada, a feature-length remix of the classic anime Akira set entirely to the music of Scottish electro duo Boards of Canada. Later came the new metal horse racing movie mashup Seabiscuit, there was the Texas Chain Ska Massacre, and of course the Reznor-Hanks Ryan collab no one knew they needed, You've Got Nails. And if there's one thing I really responded to in all this, beyond the Sam baiting mashing up of Nine Inch Nails and Nora Ephron, it was the participatory element. People didn't just watch these streams, they took part in them. Just as the members of the collective collaborated, it seemed like the viewers were also making the experience. It wasn't just a socially distant parody of something real, like playing headbands on House Party, or doing bar trivia on Zoom, or raving all night in Club Quarantine, and I am referring to the real Toronto-based Club Q for Charlie XCX fans, not the knockoff where you got the dubious privilege of frunking it up with the dorkiest vice president of all time. Racer Trash was a new experience that lived online. It was also pretty much totally distinct from the traditions of moviegoing itself. Serious-minded cinephiles go on and on about the sacred experience of sharing a film quietly in the dark, and sure, that's fine. But you know what else is cool? Laughing, riffing, and making jokes. Normally, you'd be righteously shushed for making snide or even appreciative remarks out loud during a movie. But with multiple screens and chats framing the streams, Racer Trash invited and rewarded a kind of running participatory commentary. Their streams are closer to the classic midnight movies of Rocky Horror Picture Show or The Room that invited fan participation, but without the established and scripted rituals. And also just waved up a little.
Started thinking about like, well, what does it mean to show something that initially was entirely virtual? What does it mean to have it enter into a physical space? And one of the things that was really important for me was the live chat, to actually preserve the concept of the live chat, which at first was something that kind of replaced the idea of like when you go to see a late night movie and everyone's cheering, or if it's like Rocky Horror Picture Show, people are like shouting things in unison. I figured that some of that might actually begin to happen in a live Racer Trash presentation. However, I still wanted the live chat. And then I started thinking, well, how cool would it be if that, you would have two audiences. You'd have the audience that was online and then the audience that's in the room, and then they could be talking to each other as well. And you would be telling the audience, don't turn off your cell phones, keep them on, interact with the film. In Canada, this is a segue, but maybe it's interesting. In Canada, we used to have this thing called playtime.
Hey everyone, are you guys ready for time play? Just open the app and select your auditorium. So get your phones out and let's play some games.
I don't think it exists anymore, but it was like people would take their phones up before movies and they had these interactive games and trivia that you would interact with. And I always just thought, this is cool technology, but nobody's doing anything interesting with it. And I don't think we necessarily did anything radically interesting with it at these TIFF events, but I did find it really cool that people were meaningfully interacting with each other and the work that they were seeing through this live chat that was projected on a second screen that we set up in the corner of the theater and made sort of large enough that everyone could kind of read off it and see it.
In a movie-going climate where everything is made and remade with diminishing levels of creativity and personality, the handmade aesthetic of Racer Trash can serve as a reminder that despite all the corporate control over media and entertainment, it is ultimately people who make the things that we love. But I can't help but wonder, now that movie theaters are open again and films like Barbie and Oppenheimer and Super Mario Brothers are making billions worldwide, is there still room for sitting at home, streaming remixes on Twitch, cracking wise with strangers in the chat? The answer is yes. The internet rocks, and that's why we make this show. So obviously, yes.
What Racer Trash does kind of prove is that if you just commit to even the fucking silliest, dumbest idea, if you just commit to it with a high level of creativity and skill, you can make something really fun.
I think that it ended around at a time when everybody was kind of able to go back outside and see each other again. I still have a lot of friends from Racer Trash, but it was a product organically of the pandemic, of us all being forced to stay inside.
If you look at the last Godzilla Kong movie, the opening title sequence actually was very heavily inspired by Racer Trash. There's a couple sections in it where we do some kind of colorful effects, and we have the video pull apart and stuff, and those were all things where I just showed the editorial staff when we were coming up with the title sequence that I wanted those little flourishes into it. So Racer Trash has invaded the mainstream on some level.